Hello and welcome to another episode of Steelfur Speaks. In this episode, which is currently standalone, but it might turn into a series, I'm asking the question, fab coaching, how does it work? Is it a good fit for you? And putting some sort of tangible, graspable, understandable concept behind the idea of fab coaching, how affordable it is, and the sort of experience that you might get if that's the sort of thing that you want to engage in. My thoughts on fab coaching are mixed. I think that obviously you should just play the game and enjoy the game, but I also feel that there is scope for the fact that, people who are time poor but want to enjoy the game and win more than they currently do might find some benefit in spending some of that money with someone who is able to spend a lot more time and money in the game to improve. And in that kind of exchange, maybe it makes sense. So if you're the sort of person who really wants to get more out of Fab, but you don't have as much time to engage with it as you want, you don't have much time to give something back to a team or to get engaged with it that way, then maybe coaching is a way for you to utilize your monetary resources to make up for the fact that you are more time poor than other individuals. And if that sounds like you, then maybe coaching is the right decision. Or potentially you're doing all those things. You're engaging with a team, you're trying to play at a higher level, and you're worried where your gaps are and your weaknesses are and those kind of things. So you turn to someone who has won a lot at a competitive level or is a good teacher to help you understand what your weaknesses are. Same as you would with any competitive sport or game where there's a lot of money on the line. Sometimes it can make sense to spend some money. So I'm mixed on it because I also think playing the game in an engaged and locked in way is the best way to coach yourself to a win, but I can also understand the potential benefits derived from actually a directed coaching session with a good teacher. Because of that, I do want to put sort of some benchmarks in, maybe get a few different coaches on the show who are going to run me through their coaching style through some active coaching, and then I'm going to give a bit of a review of their coaching service and whether or not, of course, we think it's good, and of course who we think it's the right fit for, as I'm sure every fab coach that we get on here will be good, but of course there is going to be different personalities for different people, and that is the sort of thing that we want to analyze and get to on this show. So we're going to have our first coach on the episode. He'll be joining me on this call very shortly, which will be Shahmir Samee, who is a top 8 finisher at Pro Tour Lille, and his team has also gone on, the London High Rollers have also gone on to be very competitive at a broader level, including very good places at Worlds, Birmingham, Calling and Battle Hardened, etc., etc. So not only a good player himself, but also part of a good team, and he'll tell you more about this, but also a teacher of music in his professional life, which kind of lends him to have a coaching-focused mindset. So he was someone I knew personally, and therefore the first person I thought I would get on board with this. But of course, if you are someone who offers coaching services and it's something you want to showcase or talk about, give me a look up, and we can talk about whether or not you come on the show as well. All right. So with that, I'll be back in a second with Shahmir. Hello and welcome. As promised, I am back now with Shahmir. Say hello, Shahmir.
Hi, everyone.
Shahmir is a top fab player. You have quite an interesting record, both you and I think the team that you work with. So maybe you just want to introduce yourself a bit, give people an idea of sort of what you're up to in fab if they haven't heard of you, which they probably have.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I won't presume that of myself. I've been playing since September of 2021. I started with Tales of Aria pre-release, although I was kind of following the game as soon as I saw the Calling Vegas happen. I was going, what's this about? So I've been playing now for just over 2 years, all in all. My kind of most significant results have been a top 4 performance at Pro Tour 2 in Lille and a top 16 performance coming 14th in Baltimore for Pro Tour 3, which was fantastic. I'm really thankful to have achieved those two finishes that I did. I worked very closely with a team of other very strong players around the London area and the UK, which is where I started playing. I've since relocated, but I've started coaching shortly after my PT2 performance, realizing, you know what, there's kind of a market for this. People might be interested in kind of how can I upskill and learn to play better in Flesh and Blood, because I think a lot of people, it's a skill that you can learn. It's not something you're born with, certainly not. And it's been great to work with people with all different kinds of backgrounds and interests and levels of engagement with the game and help them achieve their goals, whatever they may be.
And maybe for people wondering who haven't really sort of cracked, like, Fab coaching, is it just good players who are coming to you, you know, being like, make me slightly better? Or what sort of person is coming to you for coaching?
I've had a range from, I've literally picked up the game for like the first time last week and I want to get better at it, but I don't really know how.
That's dedication.
To people who are going, people who, you know, they're just, they've heard through the grapevine that, you know, this kind of service is offered. And there's people who are like, I want to top 8 my next Pro Quest. I want to win my next Pro Quest. I want to get to the Pro Tour. I want to win the Pro Tour. And for those folks, all the better. You know, I can offer services to a wide range of people, and I try to adapt what I do to the goals, to your goals.
I think people might find this interesting. You are actually a teacher in your professional life anyway.
Yeah.
And I mean, do you feel that translates here, or what's the background there?
Absolutely. So my professional background is I'm a professional musician, and I studied at a conservatoire in the UK for 4 years, with part of which included, a significant part of which included, teaching one-to-one for music students. And that's a very kind of physical craft in which you have to tailor what you teach to a student's needs in a given moment. So, you know, what actual physical elements of what they're doing do you need to help them improve? Can you identify and help them improve? And then as well, the kind of critical thinking about what it is that they're doing. Both sides of that play really well into Flesh and Blood, actually. There is much more on the mental side of things, unsurprisingly, but things also like managing performance anxiety and kind of physical tics, nervousness, staying in good physical shape as you approach a significant event. All of these things have actually kind of brought these in from my professional training as a musician, which has been, I'm very fortunate to have that, I think.
I think it's very interesting for me, because one of the things we're going to look at, if I bring other coaches on here and review them, which we'll see if we get there, is, you know, what is their background that makes them a good teacher, and how that indicates the sort of person that they should end up teaching. You know, whereas I imagine someone who's an actual teacher in real life, music teacher, very difficult skills to impart to people, gives you a lot of patience, understanding for those people, you know, as well as...
I think that's just the nature of being a good teacher, to be honest. I think, but, you know, there are different strokes for different folks. You might want someone who is going to grind you to the bone. I rarely do that, but I do have a lot of attention to detail. So if you're at a level where you're like, you know what, I want to win the next Pro Tour, then I'll be like, okay, this is the level of detail we're going to need to work at, and I'm going to help you get there. Yeah. Always with positivity, but the level of detail, the level of specificity you want in your training comes down to what your goals are.
Exactly. Yeah, for sure. Because you can't be relaxed with someone who sets themselves incredible goals, because you both end up being disappointed. Yeah. So let's get it. So what we're going to do today, for people who are just wondering about the episode, and I'll put the tags in and everything, is we're going to go through sort of the pre-coaching discussion, so sort of how Shahmir evaluates a person when he's coaching them, what sort of things he's looking for, questions he's asking to see what level of coaching they need. Then we're going to play the first, say, 10 rounds of a game of CC, maybe 5. We'll see how it feels, just to give you a bit of an understanding of what like active coaching feels like during a game, and then we'll leave some mystery there of how in-depth it can get in the late game. Because if you want coaching, obviously Shahmir is here to fill in those details, and we don't want to give away all of the secret spice. But like, why don't we go to the first part of that? So someone comes to you and says, "Hey, I want coaching." So say, Finbar, I'm coming to you. I want coaching. What is our first step, and what are you asking? What are you looking for? Let's talk through that process.
Yeah. So as with any skill where you're kind of working with someone as an individual, it's really important to establish like what their baseline skills are. I don't want to be teaching you something that you clearly already know. So for that, for me, it's let's see you play a game or two, whether you have some recorded footage or if we can play a game live against each other, or even against, you know, someone else whose skill that you trust and aspire to. It's all well and good to play against a random opponent, but especially in the evaluation stage, it's really important to understand if I'm aspiring to that skill level, I've got to play against it. Because I think that's one of the best ways in which you learn in Flesh and Blood. You've got to face up against what it is that you're eventually trying to become. That's certainly part of my journey to be the player that I am today. Through that, I try to establish what kind of basic skills and the heuristics of playing Flesh and Blood. There are some skills that are transferable across playing a wide variety of different decks. You might see them discussed on kind of other channels and podcasts, concepts like value, concepts also that extend to other card games, like turn sequencing, turn evaluation of both your own and your opponent's, how that influences your decisions over the course of the game. Because the fundamental thing that we're ultimately trying to improve, as a coach and as a player, is how do I make the most informed decisions that give me the best chance to win? That can start all the way back in deck building, which is something that I tend to approach after discussing gameplay, because I feel like most of Flesh and Blood comes down to tight gameplay first, and then deck building, while certainly very important, has an influence after that, usually.
Yeah.
So starting with kind of looking all the way back as far as deck building, then into gameplay decisions like, what do I sideboard into my hero? What is my game plan against them? How do my turn-by-turn decisions affect how we play into that game plan and eventually do our best to win the game? So, yeah, I think that kind of gives an overall impression of how we get there. What exactly I work with for each client depends on where they're at. So if I think your base heuristics and your concept of value and turn evaluation are really strong, then great. We'll leave those where they are, and we can improve them if we feel later on. If it feels like something, say, your sequencing is lacking, I tend to focus on what it is that will give a client the quickest improvement, so that they get real tangible feedback that is making a difference, and so that they actually see, a sizable jump in their performance. You iterate that process a few times over, and you'll find that you can take them from those basic heuristics all the way up to very advanced decision making that you'd be seeing, at Pro Tour level.
I think that's a really good sort of breakdown. So, I mean, diving into it specifically, we played a game in Barcelona. You got 1 free point of damage off me because I didn't know the turn sequencing correctly. So,
and yeah, indeed, you got some points of damage off me in that game because I did bad resource maths on trying to figure out my turn. Mistakes happen in games of Fab, but that was a learning moment probably for both of us.
But like, just to give some examples specific to me, so people know the sort of feedback you would give.
For sure, yeah.
Would you say that I have issues with sequencing, or what kind of things are we talking about?
Right. So I played against Finbar for a long time. Finbar is one of the players who, I cut my teeth on way back in the day, playing back in locals in London.
Back when I was good.
So he thinks he's washed. He's not that washed. So with Finbar, I think the fundamentals and the baselines of like turn evaluation are genuinely really strong. And that's like the most significant skill that you can have in Flesh and Blood, where you can evaluate your own turn against your opponent's, visualizing what it is that you need to do across those turn cycles to maximize your value over the course of a game. It's the finer details, and this is kind of when you get to that intermediate to advanced level that things really start to matter. And this is where we look at things like common rules interactions that maybe aren't so intuitive and obvious, but make a lot of sense if you understand the game's like core functions of the rules. More advanced kind of long-term play strategies. It's like trying to plan not just into the next turn cycle or even to the end of this one, but 2, 3, 4 turn cycles ahead to consider how your matchup against a certain hero with the hero you're playing will look, and what the win condition is for you versus what your win condition is against your opponent. That's like the higher level strategy that we tend to work on, again, at that intermediate to advanced level. It's these finer details, I think, for you, which is a great place to work on stuff.
The reason that I wanted to ask that question, the reason I think it's interesting, is that my own evaluation as a player mirrors that very much, in that I mess up sometimes on the rules, the turn sequencing in terms of like this minor interaction, or saying, oh, are we in the reaction step, or is it resolution step, what's happening where? And to an extent, late game, like my pitch stacking is almost non-existent. I occasionally think, hey, I need this card for later, so let's pitch it, and I'll see it when it comes around. But my strength, as you say, evaluating specific turns, are they good, are they strong? It's one of the reasons I play Ninja and do reasonably well with it, is I'm good at getting...
It's a critical skill, for that kind of play style.
I don't leave points of damage on the table. Like, if I look at my hand and I say this is a 16 damage hand, I'm getting every single point of that damage out, and I'll roughly know what damage my opponent's going to do to me in exchange for that, without getting blown out by someone ending a chain with a red on the ledger or something. Like, I keep track of those possibilities. So that what you've said kind of mirrors my own understanding of where I am, which is good. I mean, it's a good sign.
Yeah, I think that's a good thing for me. It's a good thing for both of us to just walk in with that same expectation. Sometimes that expectation doesn't line up, and then it's useful for me to also take on, like, if you think there's something that you really particularly want to improve, I can also start from that angle and go, say you walk in saying, pitch stacking is something I really want to work on. Well, we'll do our evaluation as normal. We'll play whatever games that we need to evaluate things. And at the end of that, I might say, I think there's a few things that we could work on before that, but because pitch stacking is a priority for you, we'll definitely find a way to start weaving that thinking into the earlier steps as well, so that you can prepare for it. And then by the time we get to, like, okay, now we're going to work on pitch stacking proper, you've got a lot of the tools in hand already.
Absolutely. So why don't we dive into a game, and we'll just talk through it, actively sort of coaching, trying to figure out the best way to play through it. And
yeah, no worries.
All right, so here we are on Talishar. I am playing Bravo, and you are going to be playing Bolton, 2 decks from the latest Realm Rumble. And, of course, I have won the die roll. So,
indeed. Great place to start.
Well, yeah, we're kind of lucky. It's the first initial decision point. So let me talk you through my thinking here.
Going first or going second?
Bolton needs to set up, likes to get stuff in his soul, and getting that for free on turn 1 seems like a huge thing. And Bravo has the opportunity to throw out free Dominate if he draws well, which can control his opponent's first turn. So at a baseline, without thinking of it any deeper, I would say I want to go first.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good evaluation to begin with. One thing that can be important to think about with some heroes, and especially I think if you're newer to this matchup, which you might not be, but another client might, is think about, like, the duality of game plans. So Bolton, for example, we know he has access to 2 kind of significant game plans with most deck lists. There's, like, the mid-rangey Raiden type game plan where he's using a lot of his traditional card pool towards just playing a fairly kind of, like, mid-rangey aggro style game plan. And then there's this full-on combo game plan that's utilizing Courage of Bladehold and Centauri Sabers. Now, it might not affect Bravo quite so much, but for other heroes especially, you'd have to think about, when I approach a hero with this duality of game plans, what am I gonna, like, what do I think they're gonna take into me, and how does that affect my sideboarding against them? That's really, really important.
I think yeah.
So on that note, what are you thinking?
I'm thinking that you're definitely bringing combo against me. I feel like I have enough of an armor suite that you're probably going to want to build to that at some point. Now, you might still be trying to put some pressure on just to stop me from crushing you every turn, but at least at the basic level, we might get to combo at some point. So it kind of just reinforces my idea of going first to have some pressure from the beginning and just slow down the setup.
All right. Well, let's see if that turns out correct. You've got your choice. You've chosen to go first, which I think, regardless of what the game plan they're on, you're absolutely right that Bolton does require some degree of resource building that happens in the early game. So choosing to go first is pretty good in either situation.
Yeah.
So, yeah, wholeheartedly agreed on that.
The next decision really is sideboard, weapon choice, those kind of things. Now, in my mind, against a combo-focused deck, the turn where they go all out is going to be the turn where I want as much armor as possible. And for that reason, it's probably a Titan's Fist, Steel Braid, Buckler kind of vibe. Though I could understand, like, needing armor, like Anathos to push through armor and get damage across the line. But I feel like that turn where I'm going to be taking damage is so important that having the extra 2 on the board is probably going to save my life.
Okay. That seems like a reasonable evaluation, I think, for that kind of setup. How punishing is it for you if I end up not on the game plan that you expected and you walk in with Buckler?
That's interesting. I don't know, actually, because this deck doesn't run... because this deck doesn't have tectonic plating on the list.
Tectonic plating.
Triggering Anathos anyway is trickier. So I think if I just end up with the Titan's Fist for 4 every turn, I'm probably still fine.
Okay. Yeah, it sounds like with the way that particular list is built, it has a mind towards taking the somewhat more defensive mindset in a decent degree of matchups because, well, to some degree, Tunic is also a really powerful offensive tool, obviously, when it gets leveraged for things like Pummel. And I guess Tunic, your most impactful plays against Bolton are going to be when you're playing your attack action cards rather than swinging your weapon, in any case.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think I'd agree with that. Kind of regardless of what you end up faced against, this takes you with a pretty safe... at least you can plan for either game plan with that kind of equipment setup, which is really critical when you're sideboarding. Sometimes your opponent's going to flip over something you don't expect. Like you're playing into dash and you're thinking, okay, they're going to be boosting into me, and they flip over and all of a sudden they're not starting with a pounder, they're starting with induction chamber. They have like Evo base set up in play and you're like, oh, this is fatigue dash, this is slap dash. Yeah. And you've got to adjust on the fly there. Yeah. So at this kind of intermediate higher level, this degree of adjustment is really, really significant.
So let me share my screen to you as well so you can see the actual list.
For sure. I've had a little experience with this as well because we've been talking about it within my team as well, and the ups and downs of the list, as it were.
Yeah. I mean, it is aggressive. It has a lot of pushing power.
For sure.
And the blocks do suffer a bit, I would say. They do suffer a bit. Though it still runs a full suite of pretty good defense reactions.
Indeed. And I think, how are you evaluating those defense reactions playing into this matchup?
Genuinely, I don't want them, potentially.
Okay.
I don't even know that I want to draw them. I feel like, again, if I think you're building towards combo, a lot of what I need to do is keep the pressure up so that combo turn becomes hard to pull off. And I feel like if I'm drawing my defense reactions on turns where you're not doing much, then they're just dead weight in my hand.
Okay. In the interest of this game being productive, I will let you know that actually I don't plan on going combo into you. I plan on going Raiden aggro.
Okay.
And the reason for that is actually because, as you've kind of identified, you have access to and want access to a ton of armor on the combo turn.
Yeah.
Which means, yes, I can take the time to set up the combo and actually kind of stymie your aggression as that happens, and it's not a big deal. But what's more concerning is that when I actually, I play out, my 2-3 Luminas. I mean, if I get 3 Luminas, then maybe all bets are off, and it's pretty hard to beat 3 Luminas. But if I get 2 Luminas off, say, and start swinging, you can absorb the first 3, sometimes even 4 swings with the help of just your armor and attack actions, which means, and rather your armor and cards that you block with from hand, which means that by the time, I actually get 2 swings worth of damage off on that combo. And sure, it was a big pivot turn, and I've maybe built up a little bit of soul, but I've also bled a lot to get there, and now you just kind of pivot right back around and keep hitting me again. So I in my experience, and I think in the experience of other Bolton players, we found that combo is not really where we want to be. Instead, we find that Bolton has Bravo has a tougher time into Raiden because so many of his cards are attack actions for the sake of enabling Anathos and the like, and for just keeping up a high level of aggression. But he still wants to have agency to be able to block. And that's where tension really arises when you're playing against Bolton. When you want to block because you have extraneous cards, but your cards block for less because they're attack actions. Functionally block for less because they have their attack actions. So
this kind of is just a point where I haven't looked at Bolton in ages because he hasn't been great. So this is like weakness of matchup knowledge due to my own lack of practice, but I do get the point,
really
right?
Critical skill to build up, like that's something that, and it changes every single season. I've had clients who have worked with me for a pretty long period of time and come back to me every now and then as a new set releases and be like, what's your take on this? How has the metagame adjusted for this? And there's so much that can change. And experience of working into a new hero with a card pool you might not be familiar with, strategy you might not be familiar with, is arguably even more important than just things like card choices and deck list building when it comes to this preparation side of things.
All right. So for the sake of getting into the game, how should I sideboard this just quickly?
So I'd suggest keep your D-reacts because being able to disable being able to block while disabling like Bolton's hero ability is really significant.
Yeah.
Similarly, I would keep your non-attack actions. The Warmonger's Diplomacy is a bit of an awkward one because it's not very powerful to play, but it is good to block with.
Yeah.
In terms of what should probably be cut, I think the likes of I'm not big on the likes of Zealous Belting. I think Pummel can be really significant, so I'd probably keep that on the aggressive side of things. E-Strike's another card where it doesn't really play super well with the rest of your card pool, so I'd probably cut those as well. Because you have 3 Visage, 3 Terror Sunder in here, I think the Warmongers are not super necessary given your density of D-Reacts in the deck, so I'd probably cut the Warmongers too, as long as that keeps your blue count reasonable. And I think this deck is capable of sideboarding the Warmongers, if I remember correctly.
It looks like it. See. It looks like it.
Yeah, we've got 3 cards extra. Red Debilitate is pretty good against Bolton since that crush effect is actually very relevant against him. Let's see. Yellow Disable. I always find that a spicy pick in this deck list. I think that's a card which could probably go. That's a little bit awkward on the cost curve. 2 more hits. Don't keep your CNCs. Keep your choke slams. Keep your keep all your blues at this point. It's probably got to be in the reds department from here, so it's a choice between Pummel and Disable, I think.
Probably 1 Pummel.
Inclination might be 1 Pummel, because you will want to keep a little bit of modality to your hand. And without full experience, I can't say for certain, but...
It's fine. We'll get us most of the way there for this game.
We'll go for one of the Disables as well. I'm sure that, when it comes to decks that, others have designed, there's a lot to be said for with their experience and expertise with the deck. When it comes to deck construction, from my side of things, when I'm coaching on deck construction, we tend to think about what is your game plan into different matchups as part of the actual building of the 80 cards to begin with, because that's so important to the final product. So it tends to be a little cleaner when it's a list that I've helped workshop, but working with someone else's, this is my kind of rough evaluation of how I think things would look. And I guess Michael Hamilton can savage me if I've gotten it completely wrong.
I mean, that's fine. As I say, this is mostly as a motivation to get us talking and get us into the game.
For sure.
So
the conversation is as important and very much as the final product. So let's get into it.
Okay, so I am going first. We have a turn 1. We have no red attack. So how am I evaluating this turn? I'm instantly starting to think, well, do I Bravo something? And that kind of instantly just goes away because I don't actually have the resources unless I play my entire hand. So once that first question is gone, which is, am I Bravoing something? And if the answer is no, then we turn to the other question, which is there anything that's actually worth playing that's going to disrupt your next turn or that's going to force you to do something suboptimal, like, so give me some armor or block with, like, there's an evaluation as to whether I think you have cards in your hand that you don't want to block with, but I think against Bolton that's not really the case. I think any card you have in your hand is probably something you'd be happy to send in my direction. So
the way I tend to think about things in this situation is, and I often start a lot of turn cycles with this, is like, what, and especially turn zeros, what are my goals in this turn cycle? Looking at the resources I have available to me, what can I achieve that would be most useful at this point in the game? So it's turn 0. The best thing you could do would be to force some kind of long-term resources out of me, like armor, or to disrupt my own turn 1 by sending some kind of dominated crush effect that's going to destroy my turn, and I get stuck in between a rock and a hard place of, do I give away armor, or do I, get spinal crushed on my turn 1, which would suck. Now, we kind of ruled that out here because we don't really have the resources to pay for it.
So really, my evaluation here is that all I really want to do is get Pummel and Arsenal.
Okay.
And then my only other question is, do I want to keep the 2-block Rouse the Ancients in my hand, or do I want to swing with the weapon in order to cycle it?
Yeah. So the further priorities we can go down the line are either to force damage on turn 0. That's always a good thing we can do in Fab. The best tool you have for doing that, considering Dominate is not really feasible without giving up Arsenal, not something we want to do very often in Bravo, especially not in this matchup, would be to hammer Pummel it and hope I don't have a D-React, which is a line we could take, but it gets really punished if I do have a D-React, and then it doesn't let you save the Pummel. So I think if we're kind of ruling out I can't force long-term interaction or disruption turn one. I could try and force some damage with the pummel if I think I need it, but I'd rather arsenal it. Then the last thing we can really do is filter. And Bravo lets you do this as much as you want, which is the pretty cool part, because you can activate Bravo's ability multiple times. And that way you don't offer me the chance to filter while you get to filter cards yourself. So if you think, I don't want any of these cards in my hand, but I do want that pummel and arsenal, you could straight up activate Bravo. It would be 4 times to cycle your 3 blues if you really wanted. Now, on the other hand, if you're thinking, maybe I wouldn't mind keeping some of this stuff in hand, like, a Cranial Crush isn't so bad, a Disable's not so bad, then you can filter less of it. I think filtering if you plan on arsenaling the pummel, the Rouse is definitely a little bit awkward in hand, so that's definitely worth filtering, unless you plan on arsenaling the Rouse itself.
So arsenaling the Rouse is another interesting choice that I potentially...
That is another line, and it's one that would let you play the pummel as well. But again, it plays into the question of how punished are you if you take that line and I have a D-react and this, that, the other, right?
Yeah, I don't think I need to attack you this turn. I think if I was going to get the threat of a crush effect off, I would do it. But I don't think otherwise it's really that worth it. So then I think it just becomes the question of which card do I want in Arsenal. And maybe Pummel is more late game and I wouldn't mind having it cycling in the deck. Whereas Rouse, it's good when I've got a lot of health.
Yeah, it's good when you can prepare it.
Yeah. So what if we do that? So I'll activate Bravo. I'll pitch the Pummel with the Disable. And then I'll just pass my turn.
Yep, seems pretty reasonable.
Pummel goes on the bottom. That goes on the bottom. And then we see if I get punished.
Indeed. Let us make some soul positive plays. Let's start with a good old take flight. And we're going to charge... interesting question. We'll charge this here for now.
Okay.
So the first question that's worth starting with, and this is probably less relevant to you at your skill level, but certainly for people who are starting out and who are establishing fundamentals, is what does my turn look like? So looking at what you've got,
it looks pretty
what's
bad.
The plan with your current... Yeah, you've got that Bravo problem of drawing multiple reds, which is a bit scary.
So my plan is potentially just try to evaluate whether it's worth taking some damage to play Debilitate. That's my initial question, is do I play Debilitate next turn, right? I have to keep 3 cards to do it. So I would probably going to be taking 2, maybe 5 damage to play Debilitate. What that does, though, is it also lets me keep Spinal Crush in my deck, because I'll pitch that and I'll block with one of these Debilitates. It's I don't necessarily like that line, though. I just don't like giving out free damage this early in the game. So
yeah, I think one of the concerns right now is that the hand is quite clunky and it's hard for us to pressure significantly. So let's think about what are some of our potentials potential outs are here right now. First of all, we have access to Crown of Providence once a game if we want to try and cycle a card, which can be a significant way out of these, somewhat awkward draws. But it's a one-and-done resource. So we need to think pretty seriously about if we're going to do that.
Very early in the game to be doing that.
Indeed.
Yeah.
So if we really want to avoid giving up that lifeline, the line would be you're kind of looking into playing the Debilitate right now, which would require you to hold 2 cards in hand, a blue and a red, to be able to pitch for it, send the Debilitate.
And I'm blocking for 3.
And you'd get to block for 3. Okay, so now we're going to switch gears. For the purpose of evaluating your own turn, it's also worth figuring out what is it that my opponent's going to do. Reading your opponent is such an important part here. So based on what I'm doing right now, what do you think I'm going to do with the rest of my turn?
So there's 2 options. Either you have a Battlefield Blitz and you're coming in with Go Again for another 4 damage. Or you're just going to swing Raiden at Arsenal.
Okay.
Now, if you come in with a Battlefield Blitz and I follow the strategy with the Debilitate, then I'm taking 2, 6, 9 damage, which is too much for my strategy to be worth it. If you don't play a Battlefield Blitz and you just attack with Raiden, then I'm taking 5 damage in exchange for a control effect.
Okay.
Which is worth it in my book.
All right. If I attack with Raiden, what else am I likely to do on this turn?
I don't know that you're likely to do anything, actually. Like, you could trigger Iron Song Versus, so you get a courage token.
Which now applies an on-hit to my Raiden effect.
True.
Which, if you had to be blocking something out, now suddenly there's a little bit more significant. Like, you...
Yes. But blocking Raiden is just as hard as blocking everything else.
Block with one of those red debilitates because you don't need it. What is it that you're going to block this turn?
I think you cut out a little bit there.
Oh, okay.
So you were saying if I know that there's an on-hit on Raiden, then it changes the calculation.
Yeah. So we know that you're going to block with... If you're playing the red debilitate, you're going to block with one card, the other debilitate.
Yeah.
The question becomes, what should you block? Because blocking blank damage, all well and good, sure, you can do that for value, but it might be more significant to block something which, if it hits, presents even more value, which in this case, the Raiden could if I plan on swinging with the Raiden. How does this affect your decision point now? Are you going to block the take flight?
I think if I'm happy to take a certain amount of damage, so we'll say 5 damage, in order to play an 8 power control effect that's going to make you block me and give me chance to play Rouse the Ancients, then I probably don't block Take Flight, because A, it turns on Bolton, and B, it's not the interesting thing. The interesting thing is either what's in your hand or Iron Song versus Raiden, whatever. So I don't know what I'm paying for yet. If I block now.
You can delay the decision to when you have more information. So you can see what I'm going to do with the rest of my turn, and then you can think, if I'm going to be playing something from hand with Go Again, or even without Go Again, if I play another card from hand, you can reevaluate then what it is that you want to block. If I don't, and I'm taking the line of I pay for versus and swing at Raiden, then that's your opportunity to evaluate that you should block there. This Take Flight isn't presenting anything where it's like, I really want to block this.
And also,
so you can delay the decision.
It is partly based on knowledge of Bolton that there is no gotcha. There's no like boom grenade waiting that's going to make this significantly worse.
For sure.
If anything, the effects you might have as a warrior get worse if I block than if I don't.
Indeed, if I'm playing some of the reprise effects in here.
Yeah. Which usually work with weapons, but anyway, that's so I won't block this. I'll just say...
Yeah, I think that's a good call.
What you're going to do to me.
And this is a play pattern which is pretty common early on, especially while Bolton's setting up. When he has to pitch, he likes pitching a yellow because he'll usually only pay one resource for something, and then the other one gets to go in versus and make the Raiden actually have a really threatening on-hit.
Yeah.
So here I get to set up a card in Arsenal for a bigger turn later on, and I'm still presenting an on-hit that says, this is potentially a 4-value attack, how do you want to deal with it?
Yeah, and this is actually quite nasty because to actually fully block this, I have to give you armor.
Yep, there's that Bolton thing coming in that makes it a bit of a pain for Bravo to block him out, but he wants to do it because you can't use all of the cards that are in your hand.
Well, my logic is that if I give you 2 points of armor now, I'm preventing 1 courage token, which is kind of worth it, and I can also use that again to do the same thing at another turn. So
Indeed.
It is losing 2 armor, but it's not the worst use of it because it does save more life in the long run.
Yeah. Sometimes you're not going to get like 100% value out of every single piece of equipment you cash in, but it's worth thinking about the opportunity cost, right? Like, what is... if I don't use that equipment, what am I letting my opponent have? In this case, it might just be 1 point of value, or it could be 1 point of value and the ability to give Go Again to something that I ordinarily couldn't, because Bolton cares about boosted power. Yeah. So courage tokens are actually really, you've got to be careful when you evaluate them.
They're kind of huge.
Playing against Bolton. Yeah.
So I love doing this as Guardian because I already have my game plan established. It doesn't get that complicated. Yep. So
just a nice big bonk on your turn.
Exactly. I just send in the debilitate.
Yeah.
And ask questions.
A lot of Fab is like this, in fairness. It's really useful to have the opportunity to like make these choices then, as opposed to... I guess what I mean is you do so much of the evaluation on your opponent's turn that when it comes to your turn, you usually have it all figured out. That's how the best Fab play usually goes.
I do get frustrated with people who look at their hand for ages on their turn when nothing has changed. I'm just like, what is going on here? Because as you say, like on your turn, I'm figuring out. I might be figuring out if I have 2 or 3 options, and I figure out what my breakpoints are, am I willing... This is what you mean when you say I've been playing for a while. Like, am I willing to take 4 damage, 5 damage, 6 damage? At what point am I not willing to take any more damage, or what point am I blocking, right? And once I figured out those baselines, I know that if he plays something else, I'm blocking with more cards. And then I have this other backup plan, which is just swing Titan's Fist or something like that. But when it gets to my turn, that doesn't happen because I have that understanding of this is probably the best line.
Yeah. So for me, I'm looking at my hand. There's a pretty cool card net which I'd like to keep around, but it's not worth me taking a Crush trigger from Debilitate. So I'm going to block 6 here and do a somewhat smaller turn that lets me just keep building up resources is the plan. I'm pretty happy to have seen you pitch a red there. It means this turn could have been a lot scarier if you had been able to give this Dominate and I had to cash an armor for it. But that wasn't the case. So I am going to send yet another Take Flight, pitching this Beacon Victory, and charging a Banner of Courage. So I get my Courage token anyway. Yay!
So this will give +1 to your next weapon attack. Okay, cool. So I think my logic is pretty much the same here. Again, just happy with the Take Flight.
Yep, seems reasonable. How does your turn look?
My turn looks like either a Rouse into Hammer or a Starstruck.
Mm-hmm. Both seem pretty reasonable.
Both seem pretty reasonable, yeah.
And I'm once again going to activate the Versus here, and this time it's
Coming
4 that threatens a Courage.
Yes. So my ideal turn here... So I have basically... This is one of the things I like about Bravo, is I have a few good options. I could hold all my cards, right? Which I'm not really a fan of, but I could theoretically hold all my cards and just send a Starstruck. Probably not the best play, because... you don't, you'll have to block with everything or not attack with everything. It's kind of a time warp, but it's giving you a Courage token and 4 life. So I don't really like that. The other option is to play the Rouse, swing with the Hammer, Arsenal the Starstruck, with Tunic coming up next turn. Or I block with the Pummel and some armor, doesn't trigger Bolton, swing the Starstruck anyway because I have Tunic.
Yeah.
And then just leave Rouse. So
if you compare both those plans, you'll find that Pummel doesn't actually factor into either of them. The Pummel ends up being a spare card because you have Tunic available.
Yeah.
So being aware of the fact that you actually have that up is really significant. I mean, suddenly you have a card free, and that card can be used to prevent that on hit that you maybe care about.
It's just whether you want the card in Arsenal, but you probably are happy to leave Rouse there until you have a better turn.
That is now a decision that you can make on your own turn is the critical thing. Because now you have the resources in hand. Once you go into your turn with 2 blues, Starstruck in hand, and a Rouse in Arsenal, you can choose, and Tunic up, you can choose whether you want to do either. In which case you have to kind of consider how do the 2 lines play against each other, but they always work with the same resources, right?
Yeah.
And that's something which I find quite useful to kind of, this is another decision that you can actually delay into your own turn cycle. Like I said, most of the time you plan stuff out on your opponent's turn, but sometimes, like in this case, it can actually be useful to delay that decision into your own turn cycle because, and this is something that will happen more in paper than over Talishar, but I'm going to draw my hand of cards, and I might have a tell or react to them somehow in a way that makes you go, I need to be playing the Starstruck here. Like, he looks like he's drawn the nuts, and I can't let him get away with it, so I'm not just going to send a raw damage turn. I'm going to make sure I send the Starstruck here. Or maybe I look kind of like whatever with my hand, or I'm giving no tell at all, and you decide, you know what, I'm better off saving the Starstruck for later on.
Now, personally, I prefer just sending Starstruck anyway, because I just like it as a big question mark. But also, I'm very fond of getting rid of Tunic as soon as it's up.
Yeah, it kind of maximizes your value on the table.
I do appreciate holding it, and I will hold it sometimes, but this early in the game, I think it's very much used to get the most out of a turn cycle. So I like it that way. So I think I just like that line where I just come in with a Tunic into a Starstruck and just...
Yep, seems pretty good.
Because you don't have an Arsenal as well, which means that this line means it's more likely I can play Rouse next turn.
Indeed, and knowing that Bolton cares often is leveraging 2-card hands rather than 1-card hands very significantly means that you can do this, and as you say, because I don't have an Arsenal, I have to think pretty hard about what it is I'm going to do to deal with this. Now, looking at this hand, I am pretty tempted to. I don't want to just let off the gas entirely. You're not threatening pummel here, very significant for me. So I'm actually going to give away some of the first of my armor to try and keep the pressure on a little bit.
Now, you have the courage token, but not for this attack, which means if you want to get go again here, you have to Snapdragon. Do I think you're going to do that? That's the question. Do I care if you draw a card? Two important questions. Okay. So. You have no resources floating, so yeah, I think that makes sense. So because you have no resources floating, I want to fully block this, so you don't get the on-hit draw effect.
Yeah.
Therefore, there's no point you play Raiden. You're going to have courage for next turn anyway. That's fine. But the stopping the draw means there's no snaps, Raiden, courage, Ironsong versus swing again.
Well, yeah, that's the main thing here is let's evaluate it in the context of, let's say I'm not going to do any of that. How does drawing a card aid me here? Well, even if I choose not to give this go again and you say no blocks, and I choose not to use Snapdragons, I get to establish an arsenal.
Yeah.
Which, for Bolton, can be pretty significant. There are a few cards which aren't great in Bolton's arsenal, but not many compared to the ones which are.
Yeah.
So it's pretty advantageous for you to be able to stop the draw here no matter what.
Yeah, with one
and this
card.
is just like a standard, like, evaluating on hits, right? Like, drawing a card is one of the most powerful things you can do in Flesh and Blood, because usually both heroes work on the same resources, right? We both know this. The moment someone gets to make that asymmetrical and draw a card, it's like, whoa, they're cooking with gas now. So getting to stop that card draw is really, really significant, I think. I'm going to choose to keep my soul around because I think I can get better use out of it than just a Raiden swing here. And I'm pretty happy to take one card from you anyway and leave you on a 4-card hand.
So I think this makes sense to play now. Oh, I pitched the wrong card. 1 second.
And details like that is things where it's like, that's
just
the detail-oriented stuff, you know? Where in paper, at an armory, you're going to be just fine. But at the pro, this is a situation where, like, depending on what your goals are, it's really important to be aware of, like, pitching the wrong card is something that we need to take the time to pace our turn, collect our thoughts, and make sure we're pitching the right card as we go in. Because if that happened at the Pro Tour, you might not get the takesy backsy. You can and probably should do, all things considered, because with how the current policy works on the ability to reverse actions having not gained information, you would usually be able to take that back. But this is just a point where it's good to understand how the session might go differently depending on what two different clients' goals are. You know, if someone's saying, I just want to improve my game for my armory, I'll be like, yeah, nothing to worry about. Go for it. If they're like, I want to prep for the Pro Tour, I'll be like, let's be aware that that happened. That's something we need to keep a lookout for in future. So we're going to integrate some strategies to make sure we're pitching, like, getting those details right, you know?
Yeah.
Okay. For me, this is blank damage, but I also have a card in hand that I don't particularly want to have in hand, so... And what have you revealed? You revealed a Choke Slam and a Thunderquake. So you can't play either of those. This is just going to be a hammer afterwards, which means I am very happy to play this at first, and then reevaluate my turn after sinking this. That's pretty funny. Okay. And now I think I'm willing to take 4 blank damage. This is not a super, like, amazing turn, but, well, how much do I care about having either of these cards in Arsenal? Honestly, not that much compared to 3 life. This card is not so significant that I really want to Arsenal it, so I will happily give it away. And that's fine by me. So I know you've Arsenaled a red Choke Slam. I've got to remember that as I move forward. Okay.
No, I think actually we might just wrap up on the game there. So we've played through a few turns. I think there's been a few interesting sort of decision points. And people can kind of see like how you're working through the turns where you're questioning, what's my opponent going to do? And you obviously know because if depending on how you're trying to play, you're playing at a level where you're trying to guess what your opponent is doing, know what cards and what threats they could bring out. You're evaluating your own turn while they're playing, so that you never get to the point where you're like, oh, I thought I had this turn, but I don't actually because of how I blocked my opponent. There shouldn't be any surprises from your own hand when you get to that next turn. Obviously, if there's a pummel or a discard effect, things get different.
Yeah, I mean, when instants and reactions come into the picture, things change. But I definitely try to keep it. I try to keep an informed decision process as you work through it, because I think when it comes to playing games in paper, especially under like high stress environments, it's very important to have that very methodical process of working through a turn cycle and working through what's my priority structure as we move through the game on this particular turn cycle. How can I evaluate my position in the game right now, and what do I have to do to maximize my odds to win based on where I am right now?
Yeah, let's get us back on camera. We'll wrap up. But yeah, so that's kind of what I wanted to show. So that's kind of, in some ways, it is practical as people would expect. You're playing games, you're talking about playing the game, you're talking about moments of learning. But I think a lot of people don't understand or crystallize what that actually means when it comes to where that expertise is going to be coming in, the sort of questions, how you're going to be breaking down every decision someone makes, or not, depending on how skilled they want to be. And if you're...
Yeah, what their goals are. That's it. That's always what I want to keep bringing it back to. Like, what are your goals?
Yeah. So if I rock up to you and I say, I want to win a Pro Tour, we're going to spend a lot of time on one turn. We're going to spend a lot of time on one turn.
And going like, there you have evaluate lines. You'll be at the point probably we can be like, there's 2 lines I'm deciding between. I have 4 cards in hand, but there's only 2 lines that actually make sense.
Yeah.
But we will spend enough time discussing both of those lines and thinking about, for example, when you were thinking about playing the Starstruck, I was like, yeah, I can see why you want to throw it, but at the same time, one of the risks of like just kind of throwing it at this stage in the game is I'm kind of still in my setup phase where I'm very happy to play a small hand just to establish more soul and look for power cards. And throwing Starstruck without Dominate really enables me to do that without stripping away my armor. Like if I had a D-React in that hand, then I can pretty comfortably literally just go like 1 card, D-React. I've given you 2 cards, don't even have to spend armor, and I carry on with my setup, which is
really what I did
not
was
where you want to be as Bravo.
Is give you a power card for very little gain, which if I had been thinking long term, could have easily just gone back into the deck or to the arsenal. I just waited.
To the arsenal, I think is the critical thing, because you had a choice between play the Rouse, arsenal your Starstruck, or just play out the Starstruck. And by just playing out the Starstruck, you kind of, again, you gave me more agency in the game, which I think is Bravo's strongest thing that he can do is say, you can't do this, and there's nothing you can do about it. So you want to strip away the resources that let them get away with that as soon as possible, like armor, D-React, etc., and then just say, I own the game now.
There you go. And I think that's entirely on me in terms of how much do I actually practice CC Fab at the moment.
For sure. It's a class evaluation thing. Like, I'm terrible at those decisions. I'm crap at playing Guardian. I don't play very much Guardian, but I understand at least the decisions that go into it. So while they don't suit my own play patterns and I wouldn't play Guardian out of choice, I can help someone do it.
Yeah, exactly, which I think is the critical skill here. All right, well, thank you so much, Shahmir. I hope this has shed light to everyone who's listening in terms of what fab coaching actually entails, and of course, how Shahmir does it and what his particular brand or style is. If people want to reach out to you, Shahmir, what is the best way? I'm not going to assume everyone knows you, as I said at the start of the episode. Maybe they don't know where to find you.
Sometimes my reputation precedes me, which I'm very humbled by. But if you need to find me, 2 best ways to do so. You can find me at Shahmir Samee on X, I guess, or Twitter, if we still call it that. I don't know what it is anymore.
We still call it Twitter, but that's
cool. Yeah, I still call it Twitter. Good. Or alternatively, if you're not on there, you can find me on Discord at Pokélop. I will try and keep an eye out on message requests. Sometimes it takes me a while to get back to people because I have a very busy working day, but I do try my best to get back to everyone.
So both
send me a message request on there.
Both Shahmir's name and his Twitter will be in the description, so if you want to find him, you can look those up and you'll see those there. And yeah, if you want coaching, reach out to him. I don't know what his rates are, but I'm sure it depends on how detailed you want him to go. So just get in touch and you can work it out from there.
Yeah, I offer a variety of services. The most common one is kind of what I was doing with Finbar just now, where I work through live with someone and I have a rate for working through live. But if, for example, you're just looking for a quick bit of feedback on some recorded gameplay, I have a separate rate for that. I have a separate rate for, I do some casting as well alongside Scott Mines. And if you would like some of your games cast, it's somewhat adjacent to coaching, but we'll get you covered there as well. So
it can be a good
any of your...
good way to evaluate what you're actually doing. I mean, it seems like that's a very good roadmap. You know, record yourself playing a game, send it to Shahmir, get an idea of what his level of feedback is and how that matches your goals. And if it works, maybe you have more questions. Maybe you want a more detailed engagement. Yeah. All right.
Yeah, absolutely. I've worked with some clients in that way in the past, and I'd love to do so with anybody else.
Brilliant. Okay, well, thank you, Shahmir, and I will talk to you soon.
Thank you so much for having me on. See you soon.
All right, so thank you to Shahmir for jumping in. As I mentioned when I brought him on, you know, I have keen desire just to be impartial. You know, I know Shahmir, he knows me as evident from the start of the video, but I do sort of want to give feedback on how that went and what I feel for people who want that kind of independent review of coaching and whether it is worth it or the service is valuable. And I'll say genuinely my feedback is very positive. So lots of green flags. If we're thinking about what's going to make me look favourably on a coach, it's going to be someone who obviously can understand the game at a high level, but depending on where you're coming from a gaming perspective, you may not need someone who is the best player in the world. I think that's very important. I think there are people who don't have the biggest gaming resumes who are offering coaching who will actually give a very good service for the level of game that you're trying to play. So if you're looking at someone who's a coach and you're saying this person has never top 8 in a Pro Tour, can they really teach me? The question is, do you want to top 8 a Pro Tour? If the answer is no, then you may not need a coach of that level. So let's put that aside. So I think the main things is we're talking about green flags. So we're talking about, is the communication good? Can this person articulate what I need to be thinking about turn to turn in Fab at a high level? Shahmir's case, I would say absolutely. I don't feel there was a point there where I was thinking something that he couldn't answer. And I know he's better at Fab than I am, which is fine. But even the ability to articulate to me the gap between us, I think, is important. So as someone who understands a lot about Fab, the fact that I have this better player who's able to articulate the difference in what we're thinking and the difference in modality and sort of, you know, definitive areas where I need to focus on and things that I might not miss. So for example, with the Starstruck play where I kind of just thought, well, it's a good idea to keep the tempo, play this big attack. He correctly, I would say, in retrospect, pointed out, you've just given me one of your big attacks in exchange for no dominance, so just no blocking, you know, just a block with cards from my hand. I still had a very good turn. You didn't really achieve anything, but now you're -1 huge attack that could be used to control me later on. And I think he was entirely correct that if that had gone into Arsenal and we were playing in person, I could have had a read on him to, you know, use that at some point in the game, hold the shoot it counter, have 2 blues in hand, a turn when he's going really aggressively and I can hit back with his Starstruck would have actually been much more impactful, especially if I could dominate it. So I fully agree with that. So that's kind of what we're talking about. We're talking about levels. To a certain extent, maybe you're going to coaching for information on matchups that you haven't practiced or to help you practice. But I think if you're maybe trying to play at that level, you want to be practicing a lot yourself and also then going for those detailed decision analysis, big questions about what you're getting out of this, both short-term and long-term, and all of those things coming together. So communication-wise, I would say very, very good. Other green flag, of course, is his just unique evaluation of someone when they come to them. You know, what are you trying to achieve and what are your weaknesses? You know, as I said, I have my own sort of very self-aware understanding of what my weaknesses are as a player, and it was interesting that before I even said that, Shahmir and I hadn't really talked about what we think my weaknesses are as a player before, because I'm not in his testing team, you know, we're not evaluating me on that kind of level. He came out with exactly the same things that I thought and then mirrored back to him about my own playstyle. So clearly someone who is, you know, very attentive. Shahmir and I have only actually played 2 or 3 games together in the past 6 or 7 months because he's been away and I've been away. So, you know, based on just a few games we played before, his evaluation of me, I would say, was quite correct. So I would imagine that he provides the same level of detail to his customers in terms of how detailed he is in evaluating them. So listening to the goals, evaluating the player, and then being able to articulate the difference between player A and player B, I feel like that is actually a very good benchmark for a coach. So I would say I would rate Shahmir quite highly as a coach, recommend his services. And I'm not there to say that I think any of the Fab coaches that might come on, if this turns into a series, if you'd like this to be a series, do let me know, will be bad, but there might be different opinions, moods, play styles, just ways of articulating and communicating. To me, Shahmir seems to be a good fit for someone who is, with set goals, but like sort of very welcoming to listen and adapt when it comes to feedback. I feel like if you're going in with your own sort of more argumentative need for a coach who's going to sort of yell you down or sort of grind you to the place you need to be, he's not the person to choose. But I feel like for the average person who just wants to improve, who has a sort of open attitude to learning, and is willing to sort of listen to explanations and take them on board, that is kind of what's coming out here. I don't really know if I feel like there is a lot of talking involved, but it is a card game, so it does feel like a lot of talking is fair. But it does. I think it very much is a case of like description and show by talking rather than necessarily show by doing. Sometimes maybe might be the style that you get from this. But I think because you're playing games, there will be a good mix of it. So yeah, in general, my review of Shahmir, I thought very positive experience. I can very much see a lot of people getting stuff out of coaching from him. Just to wrap things up, obviously, if you are a coach and you think, hey, I would like to show off my characteristics and talents on here, or it's the spicier option, and I do put this out here because I think it is very valid. If you have had a negative coaching experience with someone, do come and talk to me about it. I'm not guaranteeing that I will make an episode about it, especially if it's just based on hearsay, but I am very much interested in understanding the landscape of Fab coaching and what the good and the bad is. I do suspect in the majority, most people are going to be overall kind of positive, because, it's a self-selecting thing where we are a community-focused game. The people are going to for coaching are known in the community. So it's kind of like a self-feedback loop where the positive people get coaching and get repeat customers. But I do want to know if you've had medium or bad experiences with people, do reach out and tell me. I'm not going to name and shame. I'm not going to turn around and start blasting people on Twitter, but I am very curious. And that's it from me. So thanks for listening. As always, if you liked this, like it.